Hello, friends. We're back doing part 9 of the Bhagavad Gita with the commentary of Yogananda. Oh, that sound doesn't sound so good. Let me see if I can fix this real quick. Does this sound any better? I'm not sure if it does. Strange. Oh, no. Well, let me know if this is annoying you guys. I don't know why it's making that noise. It only seems to do it when I speak. Let me try something else. All right, checking again. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. Same deal. Strange. Well, I guess I'll soldier on. Anyhow. Oops, that's not right. Let's see here. We're going to start off with Chapter 5, Freedom Through Inner Renunciation. Okay. Chapter 5, Freedom Through Inner Renunciation, which is better, serving in the world or seeking wisdom in seclusion. Now, hold on just a second. There we go. Maybe that'll help. Didn't do it at all. Anyways, back to the reading. Verse 1. Arjuna said, O Krishna, you speak of renunciation of actions. At the same time, you advise their performance of these two, which is the better path. Please tell me for certain. Let's see here. Arjuna, like many, I think, another true devotee. That's a strange way of saying that. Is not okay. Arjuna, like many other true devotee, is not yet free from perplexities. When a yogi begins to meditate deeply, he is so happy with his new world of inner perceptions that he wonders, should I ever return to activity in the world? Should I not rather confine myself wholly to secluded meditation? These two paths have been the cause of many controversies. The initial romance of the infinite in the path of meditation is likely to make the devotee one-sided. He inclines to forsake the path of action. The cosmic law, however, compels man to activity regardless of what mental determination he may entertain regarding his conduct in life. He who is part of creation has obligations towards creation. He is forced, even against his conscious will, to play his equitable part. Just as a man cannot successfully decide with his mind that he will stop breathing, so he cannot effectively decide with his mind that he will stop acting. There are exceptional cases. A yogi who has destroyed the roots of all past actions with their resulting longings may be filled with the consciousness of God to such an extent that his only activity consists in divine meditation. For such rare yogis, there is no necessity for outer actions, or if actions are performed, no karma occurs. Okay. Even great yogis, however, do not engage in outward activities, nevertheless perform a certain minimum of actions. Inwardly, they are very active in sending forth divine vibrations by which they help in others' liberation. No devotee comes on earth only to meditate on the Lord and to do nothing else. Had that been his goal, he would have found many other worlds in God's vast creation far better suited to his purpose. The Lord himself declares, quote, Arjuna, I have attained everything. There is nothing more for which I can wish, and yet I work on. Those who emulate me are those who in yoga meditation attain oneness with me as the quiescence absolute, and who also perform dutiful activities even as do I myself, unquote. Man should thus practice yoga techniques in order to realize his oneness with the Lord. At the same time, he must perform his worldly duties as a quote-unquote sacrifice before the altar of the pernicious worker, God. Verse 2. The Blessed Lord answered, Salvation is found by both renunciation and performance of action. But of these two, the yoga of works is better than the renunciation of works. The Lord's answer is unequivocal here. Quote, It is better to perform one's spiritual and material duties. The devotee who renounces all activities and seeks out a sequestered cave for solitary meditation on God has chosen the inferior because one-sided path. Salvation has a twofold foundation. Man, as a true image of God, must renounce all his mortal desires, instigated by cosmic delusion. At the same time, man must contact the Supreme Being, his cosmic counterpart. The devotee intuitively receives the answer from the Lord during ecstatic union. Quote, the path of performance of right action without desire for their fruit, plus meditation on me by yoga technique, is superior to the life of meditation without outer activity, unquote. This section is called The Superior Way of Acting for the Lord and Meditating upon Him. The path of performance of dutiful actions without desire for their fruits, together with meditation on God, is the better way because it gives the devotee a chance to work out his karma by employing his material desires in the service of God. In this way, the devotee's mind is engaged in pure activities, unlike the vacant mind of the worldly idler. And I would just like to add for a quick second here that just like Paul in the Bible talks about, they talk about what's better, works or faith, and one of the interesting things is that, like, how do you define what works is? And when you're out there doing your everyday thing, like, are you aware enough spiritually to understand that you may actually have a much bigger part to play in somebody else's life at any point in time, like if you're paying attention, that is. Continuing, the monk in the cell, on the other hand, may easily abandon contact with worldly objects and yet be unable to cast off his innate material desires from past incarnations. It is very difficult to exorcise the demons of longings, passions, greed, and sex propensities ever present within the undisciplined mind. A monk may renounce the world without being able to flee from their inner psychological enemies that exasperatingly follow him to his cave. In that case, it is the better path to live in the world, but not belong to the world. That's yet another quote from the Bible. Then a devotee's mind does not feel frustrated longing for the world as a monk might feel, for it is his solitude. Anyone will find solitude tormenting if his mind dwells on what he has renounced and not on all absorbing divine presence. Yogis completely immersed in God are not required to perform worldly duties because they have extirpated all egoistic desires for this life and of past incarnations. In the superior way of acting for the Lord, and also of meditating upon him, the yogi takes no chances of losing him, whereas the restless monk in his cell, employing no scientific steps to quell his passions, may remain indefinitely without divine communion. It is far better, however, for the God-seeker not to get mixed up in the worldly environment, but to live in a hermitage under the guidance of a true guru, working only for God through serviceful activities, practicing renunciation of the fruits of actions, and cultivating ecstasy with God by meditating ceaselessly on the Lord. That life is infinitely superior to a well-intentioned but ineffectual complete outward renunciation of activities and consequent shirking of all human duties. Even the outward donning of the Swami's robe or the monk's habit is not proper, lest worldly people lose respect for the religious orders, until one is a monk at heart, has renounced all worldly desires, and is immersed in God. There is no meaning in monasticism without the inward joy of God. Good point. Aspiring worldly people are benefited by occasionally seeking solitude, or, better still, by visiting a hermitage where they can see and absorb the true and proper ways of divine living. A value of occasional solitude is not to be underestimated, for it affords man an undisturbed opportunity to think of God and nothing else. Then the refreshed devotee can return to the world or to the hermitage to assume his usual duties. But if one considers the night to be his, quote, forest of solitude and cell of silence, unquote, it will be unnecessary for him to make expensive or difficult trips to find solitude. Above all, the seeker must learn to love God in whatever he is. As soon as he closes his eyes, he is surrounded by a cell of silence. The cosmic deity throbbing in his heart has ever new joy. The blissful light shines behind the darkness in deep silence. With closed eyes, any devotee may behold it. Quote, be still and know that I am God. Yet another quote from the Bible. Verse 3, O mighty armed Arjuna, he is to be known as the constant sannyasi, which is a renunciant, easily liberated from all entanglements, who has neither likes nor dislikes, because he is unbounded by the dualities, nature's pairs of opposites. The commentary continues, or starts, the true renunciant, whatever be his place or duty in life, is the God-centered devotee. With divine nonchalance, he experiences the world as a play on ideas coursing through his mind and made pleasurable or painful by their warring contrasts. Oh, isn't that the truth? To think on the causes of pain or to be afraid of pain, pain being anything that rouses displeasure or dislike, is to be bound by the body. To dwell mentally on the causes of pleasure, pleasure being that which causes attraction and liking, also means bound body identification. The devotee who wants to regain the lost paradise of unconditional happiness learns to be indifferent to pain and pleasure of the body, receiving neutrally in all external sensations. This teaching of the Gita is not a philosophy of the negativeness or negligence. Man has his proper duty to the body. The devotee should practice titiksha, which is spare me here, imperturbability. I'm not sure what that means. This disciple whatever. This discipline allows for the removing without inner impatience of pain or causes of pain. The physical temple should be protected until final salvation is reached. The body should be sensibly guarded as long as God wants to work through it. The man of self-discipline never allows himself to be attached or to mentally identified with the physical body, but sensibly maintains it as a matter of divine duty. What did I do here? There we go. The yogi tries to keep the body well because it is easier to hold the mind on God without the distraction of pain. That is true. Nevertheless, and this is another reason why, I'm just going to stop here for a second. This is another reason why the physical postures of yoga and practicing it helps to actually build your body up to the fact that you can actually sit in a just meditative posture for long periods of time without pain. So just to keep that in mind. Nevertheless, continuing, his endeavors to feel the divine presence are not deterred even when aches invade the body, even when he is trying to remove them. When the yogi can retain his inner calm and happiness during the experience of physical pleasure or physical pain, he becomes one with his ever-blessed self. Negligence of the body, therefore, does not necessarily denote a man of renunciation, as some people think. The yogi is a man of God realization. He has found the happiness of his soul. He is also a man of renunciation. Uninfluenced by the ever-changing conditions of the world, such divine beings of whom remain above the entangling reach of the senses, even while they engage in action, are the true sannyasis, which is a renunciant. Verses 4 to 5. Verse 4, not sages, but children speak of differences between the path of wisdom and the path of spiritual activity. He who is established in either one receives the fruit of both. He who is truly established in either one receives the fruits of both. Now, the path of wisdom is Sankhya, and the path of spiritual activity is yoga. Verse number 5, the state attained by the wise is also attained by the doers. He has truth who beholds as one both wisdom and right action. And again, the state attained by the wise, and in parentheses, the jnana yogis who successfully follow the wisdom path of discrimination, Sankhya, close parentheses, is also attained by the doers, in open parentheses, the karma yogis who succeed through the performance of scientific methods of yoga, close parentheses. Just wanted to throw that out there. And now the commentary continues. The comparison here is between the successful performance of scientific methods of liberating actions, dutiful and meditative, by karma yogis, and the non-performance of such actions by jnana yogis, who instead succeed in the purely mental or wisdom approach to realization. Even intellectually learned men are like uninstructed children if they see differences between the path of wisdom and the path of right action. The wise engage in activities. The doer of right actions is wise. Those who study the scriptures only intellectually make a distinction between the path of wisdom and the path of action. The true yogi sees no division between wisdom and right action. He who truly follows one path receives the benefit of both paths. I absolutely agree with this. The ecstatic union with inner wisdom, or the performance of divine and meditative actions, leads to the same plane, the perception of cosmic consciousness and cosmic bliss. The yogi who is immersed in wisdom and the yogi who performs action sees two modes of salvation as one. They alone are the perceivers of truth. The Vedantic way of acquiring wisdom consists of listening to scriptural wisdom, explained by a self-realized guru, and meditating on it, perceiving its essence by becoming one with it. The far different theoretical methods of learning scripture does not produce real wisdom, merely imaginary ideas about it. God is wisdom and bliss. When wisdom is gained by the Vedantic way of meditation, it produces God realization. Similarly, when bliss is gained through the scientific methods and meditation techniques of yoga, it produces God realization. Thus, the sage first attains the wisdom aspect of God, while the yogi first attains his bliss aspect. The wise man realizes God as the sea of perceptions. The yogi feels God as the ocean of eternal bliss. By a slow, circuitous, difficult path, the sage reaches the same divine goal that the yogi attains by the, quote, airplane route, unquote, of scientific self-realization. The wisdom path, jnana yoga, is long, dry, and hard. The yoga way is short, easy, and strewn with perceptions of ever-new bliss. Wisdom is not as impelling a force as divine bliss. The Gita way of freedom, meditating on God's pulse, desireless activities. Excuse me. Verses 6 through 7. And I'm going to take a quick drink here. Number 6, but renunciation, O mighty armed Arjuna, is difficult to achieve without God-uniting actions. Yoga. By the practice of yoga, the Muni quickly attains the infinite, and Muni means he whose mind is absorbed in God. Number 7, verse 7, no taint, karmic involvement, and touches the sanctified man of action who is engaged in divine communion of yoga, who has conquered ego consciousness by attaining soul perception, who is victorious over his senses, and who feels his self as the self existing in all beings. Oh, that's beautiful. I wish more people can come to that realization. So the commentary starts with the true state of renunciation, transcendental freedom from sense attractions and repulsions, is difficult to obtain without the accompaniment of meditational activities. The Gita is again pointing out that renunciation is more naturally and easily attained through the inward discipline of yoga. When the yogi, after ecstatic union with God, comes down to the perception of his body and engages in activities for him, as in God, he finds his soul purified from all traces of past good and bad karma, which are now utterly destroyed by the fire of wisdom. Victorious over his senses, he rises above bodily consciousness and retains soul perception. Even though he satisfies the bare needs of his body and performs all other necessary duties, he is not entangled in any karmic results. He performs actions not as a mortal man, but as the self-permeating all beings. Verses 8 through 9. Oh, I guess he just puts them together here? Okay. The cognizer of truth, united to God, automatically perceives, quote, I myself do nothing, unquote, even though he sees, hears, touches, smells, eats, moves, sleeps, breathes, speaks, rejects, holds, opens, or closes his eyes, realizing that it is the senses, activated by nature, that work amid sense objects. Very well stated. The commentary continues. The yogi who can retain ecstatic union with God in his wakeful state realizes that when he works with the five instruments of knowledge, the senses of seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting, it is God in the aspect of Mother Nature who is employing those five instruments. Working with the five instruments of action, the anus, the genitals, the hands, feet, and organs of speech, the yogi similarly feels the cosmic deity to be the operator of those organs. Perceiving his five life forces, those involved in inhalation and exhalation, in cleansing of poisons, in bodily metabolism, in circulation and assimilation, concentrating on the senses or withdrawing his attention from them, work performed by the mind, or utilizing the instrument of discrimination, employing in dreaming and perceiving inner and outer wisdom, the yogi realizes that he is not doing anything, that all bodily activities are being carried on not by any personal physical power, but by the 19 elements of the astral body, which in turn is guided by the ideational sheath, which in turn is the sheer thought of God. The body-identified man imagines his ego to be the doer of all actions. During all activities performed by the senses, mind, and intelligent life force, the egotist thinks, quote, I am the doer, unquote. He is engrossed in the, quote, I am, unquote, feelings, and the, quote, I am seeing, unquote, quote, I am seeing, I am walking, I am living, I am discriminating, and so on. But when man achieves ecstatic union with God, he loses all egotism and finds the true self. The perfect image of God, which is instead of his ego, is the true doer of all actions. The beginner yogi delusively perceives his body and mind as independent forces, but as he becomes more and more able to retain consciousness of God, he understands clearly that it is the astral body of 19 elements, guided by the true self, that is the sole doer. Thus the yogi who is one with spirit may sleep or not sleep, eat or not eat, see or not see, work or not work, walk or not walk. When he performs any worldly actions or not, he realizes his body to be activated solely by cosmic consciousness. Such a yogi is free from all fears and hopes, all mental ups and downs. His feelings are attained with emotional likes and dislikes. Through the transparency of his heart, chitta, meaning feeling, also, the yogi perceives the spirit and not the ego as the activator, where, quote, where I remain, thou art not, that when thou comest, I am not, unquote. The undisciplined man and self-controlled sage both perform bodily actions. The sensualist is bound by desires, and if he dies without conquering them, he is born again to satisfy his unfulfilled human longings. But the yogi who performs his duties as enjoined by God without personal motives remains free from any karma resulting from work in any way with the body. He is not required to be reborn because of the personal desires connected with his body or mind. The subsections called the Gita's counsel perceive God, not ego, as the doer of all actions. The Bhagavad Gita here reveals one of the most effective ways by which man can free himself from the shackles of good and bad karma. When a novice in the spiritual path eats, for instance, he should enjoy eating only as a pleasurable duty for preserving the temple of God. When he sleeps, he should think the body is being quieted, that he may subconsciously enjoy the restful presence of God. When he meditates, he should feel God manifesting through him as joy. When he perceives the workings of life's energy within his body, he should consider the cosmic dynamo to be lighting up the lamp of his flesh. When he is thinking, he should feel that the cosmic wisdom is working through his discrimination. Whether he is thinking, willing, or feeling, he should consider that God is employing his faculties. When he is working with the 5 instruments of sensory knowledge and 5 instruments of bodily execution, he should consider God to be working through those 10 instruments of cognition and activity. By living in this consciousness, the yogi dutifully acts out the part assigned to him by God on the stage of life. No matter what he does, he is free, i.e., he is acting in his own nature, the soul, which is free. Quote, the senses work amid sense objects, unquote, means that the yogi beholds his senses of sight, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and of moving and working in the objective world as guided by the cosmic plan of God and not by the whims of his ego. When the yogi beholds his senses as divinely guided, he lives in this world as God has planned. The yogi is disinterested in working for himself, but is proud to be associated with the fascinating works of God. Wow, yeah. Oh, this hits me in a very personal way. Hi, guys. Yes, I'm back. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you guys joining today. And yeah, I'm going to be finishing this book and delivering a bunch more videos coming up soon. So I hope you guys are ready because definitely got some interesting stuff. Anyways, continuing. Verse 10 Unlike unto the lotus leaf that remains unsullied by water, the yogi who performs actions forswearing attachment and surrendering his actions to the infinite remains unbounded by entanglement in the senses. And the commentary continues. Though floating in muddy water, the lotus leaf remains impermeable, unsoiled by its environment. So also lives the emancipated yogi in his muddied sensory world of Maya. And it makes you wonder too about all the Egyptian lotus iconography as well, right? Anyways, continuing. And we'll definitely be going into that. An excitable man becomes emotionally stirred up by viewing a melodramatic motion picture. A calm man remains unaffected. Similarly, worldly people are full of turmoil while beholding the good and evil dream, the pictures of life. Yogis, on the other hand, are undisturbed. Milk cannot float on water, butter can. Minds liquefied with troubles and compelling sensory impulses become mixed with and defiled by the waters of poisonous evil environments. Devotees who participate or precipitate the butter, quote unquote, of self-realization can easily float untainted on the venomous waters of Maya. There is a deeper meaning to this stanza that will be understood by advanced yogis. I will explain it as simply as possible. When perused with insight, the Gita discourse becomes a wonderful exposition of the science of yoga. When the yogi, in ecstatic meditation, withdraws his life force from the body's trillions of cells and from the nerves, he beholds the life force current like little streams trickling back from the shores of the flesh through innumerable small channels into the large channel of the spinal cord. All the currents of the body thus withdrawn into the spine then pass successively into and through the three luminous, quote, nadis, which are subtle tubes or channels of life force, of the astral spine, which is called the Sushumna, the Vajra, and the Chitra, and becoming one current as it passes through the innermost channel, the Bramanadi, the actual spine of the causal body. The Bramanadi is so called because it is the primal channel through which Brahma, the spirit as soul, life, and consciousness descend into the body and through which the yogi attains ascension into spirit. And all I can say about that is if you guys can ever get to the point where you can experience what this feels like, it's one of those things that was just like, there are some things in life in the spiritual path that just give you an unequivocal, like, yo, this is real kind of thing, right? This is his explanation of how this kind of thing works, is one of those things. And if you can experience it, it is something else. And that's why I'm reading this, so you guys can, have maybe some wisdom and inspiration to meditate and get to that point. And I swear to God, one of these days I will start doing some meditation videos with you guys somehow. Anyways, continuing. In dissension, the spirit of Brahma present, and the soul of man comes down through the Bramanadi and later entered the three astral tubes, passing finally through their openings into the grosser channels of nerves and cells of the entire physical body. This section is subtitled True Surrender to the Infinite, Retiring Life Force Through the Bramanadi. An advanced yogi who experiences the retirement or ascension into the Bramanadi of all the activities of life force and the processes of consciousness is spoken of as one who has, quote, surrendered his actions to the infinite, unquote. The spirit of cosmic consciousness present in the Bramanadi. When the yogi retires his life force and processes of consciousness through the Bramanadi, he sees, from that point of divine origin, wondrous astral phenomena. He is warned not to be attached to them, as any form of attachment forces the yogi to come down again to the sensory surface of the body. He should bypass the miraculous phenomena until he reaches the universal essence. And yeah, there is something I could definitely say on this, but I'll continue. The advanced yogi takes his ego, life force, and processes of consciousness up through the Bramanadi causal spine, quote unquote, to its opening, the Brahma Rahandra, at the top of the head. in order to enable his transformed ego, the soul, life energy, and mind to pass beyond bodily confinement and attachment and be united with omnipresent blessedness. And again, this is totally real. When the yogi is thus able to unite his soul with the infinite, this union destroys all his past karma, and he is known as one who has ascended from the flesh, burning all his past karma in the fire of ecstasy, savikalpa samadhi. He perceives God without creation. He then learns by the highest ecstasy, nirvikalpa samadhi, to manifest his God consciousness in the flesh and perform all actions without being entangled by their good and evil effects. In this highest state, the yogi perceives God, creation, and his bodily perceptions to be existing and working together in harmony, as described in verses 8 through 9. The yogi then performs all actions of body and mind without attachment, beholding them equally as waves of cosmic consciousness. A person being tossed on a wave in the ocean cannot very well perceive the whole ocean. But as he comes out of that wave and stands on the shore, he can see the vast ocean without concentrating on any individual wave. A yogi similarly withdraws himself from the motion of the waves of his specific life and watches from the shore of divine blessedness, the ocean of cosmic consciousness without the waves of creation, which is savikalpa samadhi. As a man on a beach can view the immense ocean as a single mass of water, then can notice the individual waves as well as the ocean as the whole, so a yogi, after perceiving the sea of cosmic consciousness without the waves of creation, can increase the depths of his intuition to perceive simultaneously the ocean of cosmic consciousness and also the waves of all creation. And that is nirvikalpa, or highest samadhi. Verse 11, for sanctification of the ego, yogis perform actions solely with the instruments of action, the body, the mind, discrimination, or even the senses, forsaking attachment, disallowing ego involvement with its attachments and desires. The commentary starts off with the art of proper action leads to the purification of the ego. This means the performance of good actions that counteract or undo the effects of past wrong actions and that contribute to the transformation of the ego into its pristine state as the soul. The ego is always identified with and engrossed The ego is always identified with and engrossed in material things. Its effects on actions result in self-perpetuating attachments and desires. Desire is produced by the contact of the instruments of action with matter when those instruments are under the influence of the ego. The yogi uses his God-given instruments of action, but restrains participation of their usual boon companion, the ego, and thus acts without attachment and desire. Attachment is the offspring of desire. Attachment then gives birth to further desire. Attachment is not possible without desire, but desiring can be initiated without an obvious prior prompting of attachment. This is because of the underlying ego's intrinsic attachment to things material. Every time the egoistic man entertains a desire, he puts a condition on himself that he will have to fulfill. Very true. Every desire is a burden that he will have to work out at some future time. Even a forgotten desire continues to lurk behind the screen of his subconsciousness, ready at an opportune moment to ensnare his host and exact its dues. With every desire, man travels further from the natural peace of his soul, because desire's indiscriminate temperament makes him forget the purpose of his existence. He is led by attachment, born of desire, to cling to those things that are incompatible with his soul's nature. He prays for things that are even dangerous to its peace. The soul, thus enmeshed in desires, becomes the limited, superficial, material ego, with its tunnel vision attachment that shuts out the perception of superior soul bliss. The clear-sighted yogi, however, knows that activity with attachment and desire is the harbinger of trouble and suffering, whereas activity without these disturbing elements reveals one's true duties, which in turn purify the self and restore the permanent peace and bliss of the soul, as noted in the next Gita verse. Therefore, yogis should not perform any action instigated by egoism, with its attachments and desires arising from likes and dislikes of the heart. They should perform dutiful actions as inspired by God and the Guru, merely using in a non-attached way the instruments of the body, senses, and mind, and intellect. One who cannot distinguish between divine inspiration and selfish desires should seek the guidance of his guru. When a devotee discovers his life's duty, he should perform them with intense interest to please God and the guru, without being attached to the fruits of action. A true lover of the Lord is happy to succeed in any of his divine adventures, but when he is thwarted or opposed, he does not weep and lose enthusiasm. He tries with deeper interest and stronger effort to achieve what he has previously failed to accomplish for God, unless his guru directs him to do otherwise. For the advanced student, a few hints are given in the following lines about, quote, sanctification of the self, unquote. The nerves are the main pathways of life force in the body. They correspond to the subtler and more intricate nadis of the astral body. Many nerve passages are, quote, clogged up, unquote, or impaired in the ordinary man's body owing to bodily toxins and unnatural living. Also, the life force in nerves engaged in enjoying sense objects become matter bent. The flow of the life force is from the brain to the senses, a descent that attracts the consciousness to material objects. These outward bent nerves, impulses, and energies in their gross state of sense entanglements are contrary to the soul perception. Yogis therefore advise proper diet, postures, and Kriya Yoga to purify the nerves so that they become spirit-bent channels, leading the consciousness away from the senses by asanas, which are spiritual practices, and mudras, which are various hand gestures, right? Control of life force, chanting prayers, penetrating the mind and life energy through the 7 cerebral spinal centers, the chakras. Concentration on the infinite and deep devotion, one can purify the body, mind, and heart to serve as the receptacles of the infinite. Verse 12. But before that, I'm going to take a quick sip. Verse 12. The God-united yogi, abandoning attachments to fruits of actions, attains the peace unshakable, peace born of self-discipline. The man who is not united to God is ruled by desires. Through such attachment, he remains in bondage. The commentary continues. The yogi who works without desires for the fruits of his actions through lack of needless distractions become united to God and finds divine peace. Self-discipline or control of body and mind through the steadfast practice of the right methods of meditation and body purification, as cited in verse 11, gives the devotee victory over the senses. When he is lord of the senses, he becomes one with God and manifests the infinite peace. Those who lead unbalanced lives devoid of spiritual discipline perform actions for their egotistical interest. They confusedly roam in the labyrinths of endless longings. By performing actions to satisfy the unquenchable desires of the ego, they forfeit all peace. And I just want to make one thing about, because there's a lot of talk about desire in that last chapter. That's a big one. And that, that desire goes way back. I mean, thousands upon thousands of years. In a lot of these mythologies, it's obviously something that, as far back as you can go, people have struggled with the idea of desire. And so this is not something new by any stretch of the imagination. But yet, at the same time, us humans seem to have such a problem with this. After thousands of years of this being an issue, here we go, still in the same place. And interestingly enough, too, one of the most important gods in the Greek pantheon is Eros, the goddess of desire and love. So, I mean, he's the guy who kind of kickstarts the whole thing. Anyways, continuing. The emancipated yogi, one with the blessed God, works for him only. He knows the earth to be a dream drama of divine activities. Oh, I guess I should have waited to do that commentary. Sorry. The self as transcendental witness, ensconced in bliss, unaffected by the world. Verse 13. The embodied soul, controller of the senses, having mentally relinquished all activities, remains blissfully in the body city of the nine gates, neither performing actions himself, nor making other performing actions, i.e. the senses. So the commentary elucidates: the yogi who sees the omnipresent cosmic beam operating in his own body and in the bodies of all creatures and in all objects of the cosmic dream suddenly realizes he never was the doer of any action nor the cause of any material effect. When the devotee, by self-discipline and concentration, rises above all attachment to the body, he becomes the king victor of the senses, happily enthroned in the bodily palace. In the state of inner ecstasy, he remains an aloof witness of the activities of his body and consciousness that perform all works solely by the silent power of the divine. He refers none of his actions to his own powers, nor does he compel the senses to work according to the desires of the ego. In this state of highest ecstasy, the yogi is conscious of spirit within and of his environment without, yet is not entangled in any fruits of action. The, quote, city of 9 gates, unquote, refers to the 9 openings of the body: 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 2 organs of excretion and procreation, and the mouth. The yogi, like a retired king, beholds his subjects, the bodily cells, senses, thoughts, and emotions, as guided by the inner presence of God and not by the ego. In this way, the yogi, one with his transcendental soul, sees and feels himself to be inactive. All actions connected with the body no longer concern the yogi. He beholds himself as the non-performer of any action. Even as a man may observe unconcernedly the activities of a nearby individual, so the yogi, established in God, beholds his body to be performing all actions without affecting him. It is very difficult for an ordinary man to picture the state of the yogi as described in this stanza of the Gita. Therefore, it is well again to emphasize the point that a yogi united to God does not act like a puppet or an automaton. A man who is identified with his body suffers from any outward results of his actions, but the devotee, seeing the Lord as the sole doer, remains detached from all fruits of actions, good and bad, that have been performed by the body and mind. In this way, the yogi is not only free from the fruits of present actions, but also from the unpredictable future effects of past actions. As the victorious king of a city may delegate its regency to a virtuous successor, and himself live there in peaceful retirement, so the clever yogi conquers the bodily city of the unruly senses and then turns over its government to his beloved Lord. He himself remains quietly within, ensconced in bliss. In this high state, the yogi finds that God guides and empowers him in all necessary forms of action without making him responsible in any way for the fruits thereof. This is another one that hits me personal. The ordinary mortal may be said to be I'm not to some high estate like that, but there are elements of this where I have absolutely experienced things like this, and it's just, wow. Anyways, continuing. The ordinary mortal may be said to be a bad actor, disrupting the dream drama of God. The yogi creates no dreams of his own. He unites his consciousness with the Lord and learns to dream with him. I like that. He enjoys the cosmic dream as God blissfully dreams it, without egotistically introducing into it any disrupting nightmares of his own. Man may look around at the modern chaotic world and fervently declare that the ego has no regard for the dramatic unities. Wow, you can definitely say that's true for today. Verse 14, the Lord God does not create in men the consciousness of being doer of actions, nor does he cause actions by them, nor does he entangle them with the fruits of actions. Delusive cosmic nature is the originator of all of these. And the commentary elucidates, God is the creator of all, even of cosmic delusion, but it is man's response to Maya, which is cosmic delusion, through the misuse of the divine gift of free choice that creates in him the sense of egoism and the desire to act according to its dictates and enjoy the fruits of actions. When man exercises discrimination and does not respond to cosmic delusion, he uses his free will rightly to choose only the influence of the inner divine wisdom. Thus, he escapes the punishment that results from the false conviction of being an independent doer of actions. Ordinary individuals are guided by natural, nature-born tendencies that are in fact unnatural to the divinity of the soul, the perfect image of God. And this is interesting too, guys, because if you're listening to this,
This is very similar to many of the various Gnostic schools that were out there. Very, very similar. I mean, almost the same exact idea here is being spoken of in these kind of things. And just like the king, and the blind king in this story, who represents the ego, with one of the, fallen angels, which is Samael, is actually, I think it means blind god or blind angel or something like that. So very, very similarly, and he's supposedly the, he's one of the demiurges or whatever else. So fascinatingly enough, we have very similar kind of ideas going on here. Anyways, continuing. Sorry about that. Where did I stop? Oh, yes. When the consciousness of man is one with God, he finds his own consciousness to be free from the influence of cosmic delusion and of quote unquote human nature. But when man succumbs to the influence of cosmic delusion in human nature, he finds Maya to be guiding and controlling his consciousness and creating physical and psychological hazards. Absolutely. Nature is the consort and servitor of God, and one who merges himself in the Lord finds nature his servitor. Even though the Lord is responsible for creating man and for placing him in cosmic delusion as present in nature, yet he has given his sons the power of free choice, either to yield to the harmful misery-making temptations of his physical impulses and environment, or to follow the inner guidance of wisdom flowing from God. The ordinary man takes the so-called easy path of catering to his impulses, a choice that ultimately leads to the destruction of all of his happiness. True that. But the yogi uses his God-given free will to follow the inner guidance of conscious and intuitive wisdom and turns over the government of his bodily city to God. Thus he regains his lost paradise. And, I just want to say he constantly talks about intuition and intuitive wisdom. Don't underestimate what this means. Because when you start to gain a certain level of intuitive wisdom, it's very surprising at first. And then when you realize it's just kind of part of the whole shebang, it just becomes one of these like things that are right there for you always for you to pull out of and to tap into. And you will surprise a lot of people by your level of intuitive nature, the further you tap into this kind of thing. Continuing, the man identified with his body finds by self-analysis that the consciousness of egoism and the egotistical performance of all actions with the desire to enjoy their fruits originated in his error in responding to the influence of cosmic delusion in nature. Not blaming the immaculate Lord as the originator of his troubles, the wise man sees that all evils result from misuse of free choice, by which he has responded to nature rather than to God. Even though nature, or Maya, is responsible for the sufferings emanating from man's egotistical performance of actions, nevertheless, by the use of the discrimination and willpower, he can turn away from the nature to spirit, and ultimately making nature his own slave, even as it is the slave of God. The devotee can always appeal to the Lord in deepest prayer and say, quote, Heavenly Father, I did not wish to be created, nor did I wish to be placed in proximity to alluring evil temptations. Please, O God, since you created me and put me to the test of life, without consulting me, bless me that I use my power of free choice to strengthen my will and to follow the path of freedom and not the path of delusion. Unquote. That is nice. I like that. I wish I knew how to put a bookmark in this place, in this particular app. The divine omnipresent consciousness of the Lord is aware of all men's prayers. Quote, He that planteth the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed the eye, shall he not see? He that teacheth the man knowledge, shall not he know? Unquote. God did not create man to suffer, but to overcome all bodily material limitations by the unconquerable power of the soul. Good and evil and their relation to the soul. Verse 15, sorry. The all-pervading takes no account of anyone's virtue or sin. Wisdom is eclipsed by cosmic delusion. Mankind is thereby bewildered. Ooh, I like that one. So the commentary elucidates, The omnipresent cosmic being creates for entertainment the dream pictures for men, their virtuous and sinful activities on this dream earthly stage. Knock something over. God is not a meticulous account of human merits and demerits. The cosmic beam, its wisdom and ever-new joy are hidden behind the shadows of relativity and ignorance. Mortals, not perceiving the causative light, stumble in the darkness of delusion. As fog hides the right road to a destination and causes the driver of a car to go astray, so the mists of delusion obscure the wisdom path towards God, and man veers into ditches and mortal desires and ignorance. The spirit, or Sat Chit Ananda, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss, is uncontaminated by the darkness of delusion, nature. Even as a serpent, the possessor of poison, itself remains unaffected by its own venom. Though the poison is produced within the snake, the creature is not affected by it. Similarly, even though the delusive qualities of nature derive from God, he is uninfluenced by them. When a serpent bites anyone, the victim is affected by the poison. Similarly, man as a mortal is afflicted by cosmic delusion. Nevertheless, though Maya is imposed on man, he can overcome it by refusing to yield to its temptations. The devotee should understand that the purpose of God in creating the world and delusion is to develop perfect beings. This pastime is God's hobby. To encourage perfection, the Lord gave men free will and a challenge. He sure did. He subjected them to the inner wholesome temptations of his goodness and the outer unwholesome temptations of human nature. Life is a vast and complicated puzzle that each man must solve at last. When man skillfully uses his divine gift of free choice and discrimination to respond to the temptations of virtue and not of evil, he attains the necessary victory. He is, quote-unquote, out in the game of life. He returns to the blessed home with his heavy winnings. This, then, is the truth about the mystery of human life on earth. This is the reason why man should not yield, as many psychologists wrongly advise, to the quote-unquote natural impulses, but should be guided by the spiritual inclinations that are truly natural to his being, the soul. Amen to that. Though God is good and has originated cosmic evil only to test man and thereby afford him opportunity to return by free will to the kingdom of his Father, still the whole quote-unquote plot of God has caused man a lot of trouble. This section is called Understanding the, quote, rules of the game, unquote, and the justice of God. We must accept the fact that philosophically and we must accept, let me go back, Though God is good and has originated cosmic evil only to test man and thereby afford him opportunity to return by free will to the kingdom of his Father, still the whole quote-unquote plot of God has caused man a lot of trouble. We must accept the fact philosophically and realize the more the human body is put under discipline, the more man will find joy in the soul. These are the rules of the game, and we can do nothing about it. Good point. Nor should we wish to change the rules if and when we understand the wisdom of their divine framer. Even as God, surrounded by cosmic delusion, is not affected by it, so man, intrinsically an image of God, has within him all the divine powers. He too can remain in close proximity with the delusive senses without being subject to them. God has deliberately created each man with an eternal stamp of his own perfection. By succumbing to evil for a while or for long periods, man can eclipse the inner perfection of his soul, but he can never destroy it. As soon as he removes the enveloping delusions that persist through his own ignorance, he finds that he has always been perfect, as is God, and never was otherwise. Now, that's a big thing in the Course of Miracles book as well, a gigantic point. So fascinating to see that almost expressed word for word here. The doubting heart should remember wherein lies the great justice of God, that he has not thrown us into evil permanently by destroying our inner divine nature and by making us mortal beings in actuality. He has instead made us essentially in his image, that we never obliterate his true nature during any test of environmental cosmic delusion. It would have been very difficult, if not impossible, for man to become divine if man were really only human. but it is undeniable truth. Man was first made in the image of God, then, and not till then, was he placed under the influence of cosmic delusion, and equipped with the power of free will, the power to choose between nature, creation, and God, the Creator. Man, early or late, learns to make the right choices. Otherwise, no one would be reading this book. And I'd also like to point out, too, this whole but it is an undeniable truth. Man was first made in the image of God, then, and not until then, he was placed under the influence of cosmic delusion and equipped with the power of free will, the power to choose between nature, creation, and God, the Creator. And a man, early or late, learns to make his right choice. This is also another one of these major themes in Gnostic writings, which we will be getting into in the more put together, edited research videos I got coming for you guys. Some really fascinating interconnected stuff, particularly the ideas, which is the most important. Continuing, it is the great mercy of God that he did not create us in a mortal image, for that would have precluded our attainment of a divine nature except by God's special grace. God sees every soul as made in his image, that no matter how heavily sunk in delusion man may be, even a sinner of sinners can wash away the mud of ignorance and discover the hidden purity of the soul. We are eternally divine, only temporarily we are slaves of delusion. For a quote, for we are his workmanship, created in the perfect consciousness of Jesus Christ unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them, unquote. That is why all men should understand that sense enjoyment is not the goal of life. Only a return to perfection can satisfy the human heart and the divine plan. And I want to say one thing too, as far as sense enjoyment goes. Once you really work on not being really attached to the taste of food or the enjoyment of sex, and like you've really worked to slag a lot of that off. As much as it like you can enjoy it, it just all those things become different. Like you enjoy it, but you don't like enjoy it like the way that you used to. You enjoy it just for what it is, and then when it's done, it's done. Like there's none of this like extra stuff that we heap onto these things, which it really helps to be able to like conquer some of these things in ourselves. Anyways, continuing. Where did I stop? Yeah, a man with extremely bad karma may be immersed in delusion or many incarnations, but not forever, because he's eternally God's. And that's another thing. Origen, one of the earliest Christian fathers, who taught all the other ones that ended up calling him a heretic, he actually said something very similar to the idea that like all of us are going to come all the way back, even the devil himself, because if all creation comes from God, then it only makes sense. So fascinating. Continuing, a man who forgets his real self or for numerous lives becomes so riddled by suffering that he cannot stand himself or his own habits. As soon as he tries earnestly to improve, he discovers the path to divine joy. And that is a big one right there. As soon as he tries earnestly to improve. Because for me, I had one of these, I had enough moments of life. And maybe one day I'll tell that story. But I had it, and I just asked what the truth was. I asked for it. I didn't care what it was going to be. And from that day forward, every single thing that I've needed has always just kind of fell in my lap when I needed it. And I've learned to really trust those kinds of things. And it's really, it has changed my life completely, which is why I'm sitting here talking to you guys reading this book. So, continuing, sorry. Eternal perdition or final immersion in delusion is impossible. That's good to know. It's kind of like the hellfire, right? A piece of gold, though hidden under debris as large as the Himalayas, will remain always gold. When the dirt is removed, the gold in its true nature shines forth. Similarly, a mountain of sin covering the soul cannot change its intrinsic nature as an image of perfection. This thought makes divine sense, that man has been made in the divine image and can therefore never be eternally consigned to a limbo of delusion, or hell for that matter. It is impossible for a soul to become eternally evil because it is eternally good. This subsection is
no soul can be consigned everlastingly to hell, which is just what I was saying. Bible students do injustice to its teachings when they believe a soul can be consigned everlastingly to hell. Amen, brother. A worldly judge metes out sentence to a man only according to the measure of sin. God, more just than any human judge, could never punish man for one incarnation for many incarnations, or for many incarnations of evil life with a disproportionate, quote-unquote, eternal sentence of banishment in the hellfire of delusion. Infinite causes cannot produce infinite effects. You know, and this is one of the things for me as growing up as a Catholic. I could not wrap my head around this idea of an eternal hell, because I look around the world and even at a young age, and maybe that says something about me, or the level of development of my soul. Who knows? I don't care. But it's just one of those things. Like when I was a kid, I would like, I'm talking like 7, 8 years old. I would ask pertinent questions like, "Well, why is this not? Why are you telling me that God is this pure, loving thing?" But then He's telling in the Old Testament, telling the Israelites to go and murder like everybody. And it's just kind of like there's that, and then there's this whole Christian idea of, well, let's just say I think it was Ovid who came up with the idea of hell originally. But this whole thing with hellfire has been is one of the worst things about Christianity that has caused so much issues with people's faith, and why so many people walk away from spirituality and Christianity in general, because it's just this whole idea where like you're never going to have a right. I mean, how many people are born just with every single thing against them in their lives, and they can, barely make it, and they're gonna, the deck is stacked against most of us, right? So I mean, how could we seriously entertain the idea of this eternal hellfire because one life you screwed up a bunch of different stuff, which is why the Christian church had to come up with something like, what is it called, purgatory, which is just. Whatever. Anyways, we're going to get more into the ideas of reincarnation within Christianity real soon. I know I did a video on that a couple years ago, but boy, do I have a lot more to add to that. So continuing, sorry for the rant. This oft-quoted stanza of the Bhagavad Gita says with wonderful truth that God does not take into account the sin or virtue of man. Man himself, by his actions, reap the results of his good and bad karma owing to the proper use or misuse of his free will. Boy, is that a truth. In this sense, God does not remain in this universe as a watcher of human beings, constantly rewarding or punishing them according to their virtues or sins. But he has made laws which do not mete out invariable justice. Quote, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. But he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap, if we faint not." Unquote. Wow, that really fits so well in this part, isn't it? One of the comments here is by Hippocrates Matrix. Quote, "Religion was created when the first common met the first fool." Mark Twain. Very good. Continuing, "The Lord never punishes anyone for evil actions. Man himself is the sower and reaper of his own sufferings. Foolishly going against the divine laws and nature of his own being, he is the sole cause of his own hurt." And that's amazing, because this quote here is from the Bible. Oh my goodness, where did I just go? There it is. Okay. This quote from the Bible is like very well placed. Because, I mean, it really talks about the nature of karma right here. This is very fascinating. This whole idea that be not deceived, God is not mocked, is exactly what he's talking about here. But right there in the Christian Bible, it's just interesting. Continuing, foolishly going against the divine law. In India, the most popular quotation from the Bhagavad Gita about the origin of evil is this part of stanzas 15. Quote, wisdom is covered by ignorance. That is why people are deluded, unquote. This point can be illustrated in the following way. If a man in a brightly lighted and beautifully furnished room closes his eyes and jumps about wildly, he would behold darkness, stumble, and hurt his limbs. Recovering his sanity, he would realize that the darkness and the haphazards to life and limb has been caused by his self-imposed stupidities. Similarly, the wise man who keeps his inner eye viewing the light of God that permeates all matter is never hurt but is suffused with joy. The man of ignorance closes his eyes of wisdom and sees nothing on earth but darkness, delusion, and suffering. With the help of a wise guru, the blind devotee regains his true sight. He perceives that his own sorrows and those of all his fellow beings are caused by man's willful kept inner darkness. The wisdom light of God is eclipsed. The permanent, ever-present inner joy of the soul is hidden by the lustful human ego and by the impermanent joys of the senses. When man forsakes delusion, he regains the inner paradise. The Gita therefore says that people suffer just because they do not open the eye of spiritual perception. They are immersed in the ever-changing outer world. Certain dogmas try to, quote, explain away, unquote, evil by saying that God is perfect and cannot know evil. Yet Jesus prayed to God, quote, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, quote, unquote. And that means, and i.e., his interpretation, quote, do not allow us to succumb to the influence and test of the evil created by thee, unquote. The omnipresent Lord knows that he is the creator of evil as a test to encourage human beings to shun sin and thus recover their inner divine nature. By creating a film of light and shadow images and passing it through a movie projector, a director manipulates the one beam that projects the pictures of both the villain and the hero on the screen. The villain was included to make people disgusted in his ways, and by use of discrimination applauded the great hero. For the same reason, evil exists to turn people's attention to the better ways of virtue. Evil is a necessary and inherent part of God's creation. After learning the lessons of admiring the hero in preference to the villain, one realizes that both good and evil men are creations of the one beam. As shadows, they have no intrinsic difference. Thus, analyzing good and evil, one should try to rise above both, realizing that sin and virtue cannot affect the non-dual, changeless soul that is made in the image of God. Good and evil must ever be complements on this earth. Everything created must bear some guise of imperfection. How else could God, the sole perfection, fragment his one consciousness into forms of creation distinguishable from himself? There can be no images of light without contrasting shadows. Unless evil has been created, man would not know the opposite, good. Night brings out the bright contrast of day. Sorrow teaches us the desirability of joy. Though evil must come, woe to him by whom it comes. He who is enticed by delusion to play the villain's part must suffer the villain's sad karmic fate, while the hero receives the hallowed reward of his virtue. Knowing this truth, we must shun evil. Becoming good, we must ultimately rise to God's highest estate, beyond both good and evil. The one who looks from excuse me, I need to take a drink. Okay, the one who looks, I'm going to have to go and put my chickens to bed in a little bit, so I'm going to take a quick break in a couple minutes. One who looks from the cinema booth through the beam sees the villain and the hero both as pictures. When one is united with God, then and then only he sees no difference between the good and evil. It is therefore dangerous in the mortal state to say there is neither good nor evil. People in the audience who are affected by a gripping picture feel a distinct difference between the villain and the hero. But a discriminating viewer realizes that the role of the villain was created to enhance the nobility of the hero by presenting a contrast of good and evil. When the picture is over, he is through with it. He is no longer affected by any involvement of his feeling with either the villain or the hero. He has risen above his temporary interest in the picture, or the movie, and he knows that the villain and the hero have no intrinsic meaning. They were only different pictures issuing out of the beam, bearing no true relation to himself. The highest divine state, one similarly beholds the cosmic beam as the creator of good and evil on this earth. Conquering evil by good and then rising above both, man realizes that this world is only a divine motion picture, vastly entertaining. Yeah, you can say that again. Okay, well, I'm checking the darkness outside. All right, I'll read another verse here. Verse 16. But in those who have banished ignorance by self-knowledge, their wisdom, like the illuminating sun, makes manifest the supreme self. Wow. This one verse you can take and just go across the whole occult literature out in the history of the world and use and see the elements of that being played out for sure. So the commentary elucidates this very, very well placed verse. When the darkness of delusive ignorance has been driven away from the yogi's consciousness by the light of self-realization, then in that inner illumination of the Supreme Self, the eternal being stands revealed as the ultimate and sole reality. The devotee feels his little self, the soul, merge with as one with the Supreme Self, Spirit. Of such enlightened beings it may be said, quote, the self shines forth like a sun in those who have banished ignorance by wisdom, unquote. When the deeply meditating yogi, as in the practice of Kriya Yoga, withdraws his consciousness from all externals and concentrates within, he beholds the inner light of spirit that is the creative substance of all manifestations. As the sun's first appearance in the sky destroys the shadows of night, so the first manifestations of the cosmic light in the devotee banishes the pictures of delusive relativity that are present on the screen medium of the senses and the sky of space. And this is very true. I've experienced this. The only thing I will say on this kind of thing is if you do experience something like this, anyone who's listening out to this at the moment, don't just let it go, like chase after it. Because if you let it go, it's going to go. And it may take a while for it to come back around in another cycle for it to hit you again. But, it's one of those things in life. We all have these things that kind of show up. So, and it's up to us to actually pay attention to it. Continuing, in the primary or savikalpa ecstasy, the devotee perceives only the cosmic beam without any panorama of creation. Later, he sees the cosmic beam manifested as the checkered lights and shadows of the cinema drama of the cosmos. It requires the higher state of nirvikalpa ecstasy to perceive the partner dance of the cosmic light and shadows of creation. Even as a man who withdraws his consciousness from the plot of a motion picture can observe, by peering closely, the causative commingling of light and shadows, in nirvikalpa, the devotee perceives the cosmic light, his own body, and all the scenes of creation to be moving within himself as a series of motion pictures. In this state, the present, past, and future are revealed as one. All variety is merged in the unity of eternal presence. And isn't that fascinating that even in science, they also state that exact fact, that time, space, all that stuff are all happening all at the same exact time. All right, so this next section, the knower of spirit abides in supreme being, I'm going to have to take a quick break. So let me put the break screen up, and I'll give you guys a little bit of tunes. Well, the only tune I have, really. I'll be back. Hopefully this won't take me too long. You never quite know with animals. So let's see here. I'd say 5 to 10 minutes, 10 minutes at max, hopefully. I'll see you soon. Bye. screen is off. Oops, that's wrong. There we go. Okay. The knower of spirit abides in the supreme. Let me just make sure. Okay, yes, good. In the supreme being. Verse 17. Their thoughts immersed in that spirit, their souls one with the spirit, their sole allegiance and devotion given to spirit, their beings purified from poisonous delusions by the antidote of wisdom, such men reach the state of non-return. And the commentary continues, quote, the state of non-return, unquote, is referred to in the Bible, quote, him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out, shall reincarnate no more, unquote. That is in the book of Revelations. Devotees who use their power of discrimination to free themselves from identification with the drama of creation and behold in it only the play of the cosmic light and shadows of delusion, who concentrate on the cosmic beam and not on the shadows, who perceive their souls as rays of the cosmic sun, who are continuously absorbed in it, who have destroyed delusion by wisdom, those sages attain liberation. So long as a person has obsessive desires for the excitement of viewing motion pictures, so long he will seek no higher pastime. Similarly, so long as a man is interested in and attached to the drama of his present incarnation, at death he will depart with unfinished desires and be compelled to return to earth to experience other motion picture sequences, until all his fascinations have been fulfilled. By non-attachment, by beholding the scenes of life as a divine panorama, and by meditation and ecstasy, man gradually realizes that God is the sole director of the cosmic cinema. The wisdom so acquired brings about the reunion of the individualized soul with spirit, thus ending at last and forever long separation. Which again, Course of Miracles says that the whole subject of that book is reconnecting at long last forever, the long separation, It's amazing how close these two writings are. Anyways, continuing, inherent in this verse is another interpretation intended for guidance in the sadhana, spiritual practices, of the meditating devotee, according to the following rendering. Quote, thinking on that, merged in that, established in that, solely devoted to that, they go whence there is no return, their sins dispelled by wisdom, unquote. Thinking on that, holding the attention on the object of meditation. For example, keeping the mind concentrated on the inner sound of the great Aum or Amen, not Amen, Amen. The universal cosmic vibration that is manifested creative consciousness and power of God. The thinking state implies duality of experience, two poles, one upward towards spirit and one downwards towards matter. Merged in that, filled with the universal Aum vibration, excluding the intrusion of all thoughts born of the sentient mind, this second stage of concentration transcends the, quote, thinking state, unquote. It is oneness with the object of meditation, experienced through the pure intuition of the soul. The merged state of concentration brings the devotee in direct touch and friendship with the spirit through Om. It is a blissful state filled with filling the devotee to overflowing with confidence and faith in God. I can attest to this absolutely. I didn't come through it through the sound of Om myself, but everything else, 100%. But the merged state in the beginning is not stable and abiding, indeed. Unless it is oft repeated and the habit correspondingly formed, it is liable to disappear and be lost whenever the devotee is beset by bad habit of mental restlessness in meditation, or when he resumes his material activities after his meditations. Very, very cogent point. Very, very important to remember this, because this is so true. Once you get started, once you get the ball rolling, don't let it stop rolling, because you'll find it overgrown with moss later on, and much harder to roll. Anyways, continuing. Hence, this state is transitory because bad habits reappear as soon as new good habits and experiences complete their debut and make their exit. Devotees whose bad habits are strong easily become discouraged when confronted with the apparent instability of spiritual experiences. Doubts arise, and the faithless may relegate spiritual experiences to the realm of impractical mysticism. The fault lies in the practitioner's lack of perseverance and to make permanent their spiritual gains. The attainment of a third or established state of divine communion. Established in that. permanently and continuously abiding in the state of divine oneness regardless of one's external activities, the nirvikalpa state. Where am I? Oh yes, having mastered these three stages of concentration, thus changing the focus of the consciousness from matter to spirit, the devotee no longer harbors any desire save devotion to God and to live for Him alone. In such devotees, all sins, past and present karma, are dispelled by the wisdom light of God realization. Even as the accumulated darkness of night vanishes with the coming of the dawn, these devotees are released thereby from the dizzying whirl, the wheel of birth and death, rebirth. They, quote, go no more out, unquote, from the presence of God. Verse 18. Self-realized sages behold with an equal eye a learned and humbled Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and an outcast. Indeed. The commentary continues with this, indiscriminately engrossed in a motion picture drama in which appear mountains, oceans, skies, priests, merchants, beggars, cows, dogs, elephants, a spectator accepts the illusion that all the objects are quote-unquote different. Yet the differences are in appearance only. Essentially, all the images are composed of the relativities of light and shadows. Objects in the phenomenal world are called relative because they exist only in a relation to each other. Man's ordinary consciousness is relativity consciousness, i.e., he apprehends one thing only by interpreting it relative to something else. He cannot perceive the one, the absolute, through that relative consciousness. It was given to him in order to appreciate the nature of the many. Ordinary waking consciousness, subconsciousness, super subconsciousness, all forms of the ego consciousness share this characteristic. They are relative. The pure superconsciousness of the soul can apprehend spirit, the life and substance underlying and pervading everything in the universe. The sage rejects a superficial acceptance of the seemingly objective reality of the world, a synchronized motion picture of sound, sight, smell, taste, and touch, and perceives all phenomena as manifestations of cosmic divine light and quote-unquote technicolored shadows. To the man of self-realization, spirit is perceived as reality and creation as the shadow of the infinite. When the universe is called unreal, Brahman, Satyam, Jagat Mithya, quote, Brahman is real, his manifestation is unreal, unquote. It does not mean that the universe is non-existent, but that God is the only reality and that the shadow of his manifestation in creation is not like him. A shadow cannot be produced without an object, therefore the shadow is not nothing. The shadow appears to be like the object from which it is produced, yet it is not the object. This subsection is titled All Object of Mundane Experience Are Ephemeral Expressions of the Divine Dream Stuff. Another illustration will explain how a true devotee actually sees equality in inanimate and animate objects. A sleeping man beholding a dream drama may cry out, quote, there is a low pariah, and there is my friend, the priest. How noisy it is here, dogs barking, cows lowing, and elephants trumpeting, unquote. Yet on awakening, he realizes, if he remembers the dream, that the various quote-unquote living creatures possessed no inherent differences, all being unreal mind spinnings. Very good point. Similarly, the animate and inanimate object of this world are nothing but the sheer dreams of God. The man who is awake in wisdom realizes all objects of mundane experience to be ephemeral expressions of the divine dream stuff. When a devotee can view the earth with all its vast variety and perceive the unity of its underlying God structure, then, and not until then, does he rightly know this world to be a dream creation. If a dreaming person becomes half-awakened, his consciousness embraces a dual comprehension. He partly believes his dream objects to be real and partly realizes them as mind-spun or unreal. Similarly, in a half-awake a state of ecstasy, a devotee beholds the world as manifoldness and yet also as unified divine apparition. He sees all the objects in it, whether a thief or a sage, a cow, a dog, or an elephant, whether matter or mind, as dream expressions of the one consciousness of God. It is in this state that a man of realization looks with an equal eye on inanimate and animate creation. The first stage of divine ecstasy, Savikalpa Samadhi, gives the yogi the experience of God union in which no memory is present of the phenomenal universe. When he returns to mortal consciousness, he finds it hard to retain his divine realization. By further practice of Kriya Yoga, the devotee is able to experience God union even during the wakeful state of activities in the world. He has then achieved the half-awake, ecstatic state in which, with open eyes, he consciously sees the world around him as the divine dream. If the yogi makes no effort for further progress, the half-awake state slips away. He begins to perceive the world as it appears to the ordinary individual. As you guys can hear, there is a theme with this whole slipping away thing. By deeper development, however, the devotee is able to remain in continuous ecstasy with open or closed eyes, nirvikalpa samadhi. He learns to commingle his consciousness fully in the Lord and also to produce from that consciousness the dream of the cosmos. In this state, he can choose to remain awake in God without viewing the dream of creation, or can remain in the half-awake, blissful state. Realizing the cosmos as a very dream, when nirvikalpa samadhi is attained, the yogi no longer perceives quote-unquote actuality of the world as does the ordinary man. Modern science has discovered that the various material elements are nothing more than the differently vibrating atoms. The universe is a cosmic motion picture of dancing atoms in which in turn are energy sparks, not matter at all, but vibratory waves. That is very true. The vast steps by which a yogi becomes able to say, through self-realization, that, quote, this universe is a divine dream, unquote, are as follows. In the initial state of ecstasy, the yogi is flooded with the superconscious joy. He begins to perceive lights and glimpses of the astral world as his samadhi waxes deeper. His vision embraces the entire astral world that contains the astral counterparts of all the island universes roaming in space. The yogi then dissolves his vision of the astral cosmos into sheer thought forms. He rests in the ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new bliss, feeling it as all-pervading and infinite. The yogi later comes down to the astral sphere again and then back to body consciousness. He opens his eyes and looks steadfastly at the world before him. He sees himself surrounded by his spiritual eye of astral light. When at will he can vastly expand the sphere of his astral eye, he at once sees within all the floating island universes. Many suns and moons are there, vapors of nebulae, endless universes, tier upon tier, zone after zone, all revolving within him and finally resting in the center of that infinitely expanded astral eye. It is in this state that the yogi is able to perceive the physical cosmos and the astral cosmos to be no more than differently vibrating thoughts of God. Unless and until the yogi with closed or open eyes can feel everywhere the bliss of cosmic consciousness and can behold at will the entire astral cosmos with his astral eye and can see the astral island universes floating within him, he should not say that he has realized creation to be a dream. A guru does not encourage a beginner yogi to say, quote, the world is only a dream, unquote, lest he develop apathy to the performance of his rightful duties. A man of God consciousness learns to dream at will, perceiving then his dream of world as reality. He learns, too, to dissolve his dream at will, realizing then that his dream creation was a mere mental phenomenon. All illusory nightmare is gone. He merges his consciousness with the divine dreamer, ever witnessing the colorful premieres of supercolossal spectacle plays. And that's interesting, too, because, in quantum physics, there's this whole thing with the double slit experiment, which shows that unequivocally at this point that there is a direct connection between the person viewing what's going on and the thing being viewed. So here we are with that same kind of idea being played out here. Continuing, verse 19, the relativities of existence, birth and death, pleasure and pain, have been overcome even here in this world by those of fixed equal-mindedness. Thereby are they enthroned in spirit, verily the taintless, the perfectly balanced spirit. And the commentary continues, equal-mindedness can be attained by a technique such as Kriya Yoga, which not only disconnects the mind, but completely withdraws it from the senses. By interiorizing of the mind, the yogi experiences a state of even, unchanging joy. When he can bring that inner ecstasy to all his perceptions in the state of wakefulness, he becomes blameless and faultless on one with a taintless spirit. Sages speak of the ordinary person as full of taint or flaw because he perceives and accordingly reacts to the dualities and relativities of existence, pain and pleasure, cold and heat, life and death. Only he who can disconnect his consciousness at will from the perception of worldly objects is free from the disturbing dualities of the senses and thus rests in tranquil spirit. Those yogis who eventually perceive divine bliss in the subconscious, conscious, and superconscious states are pure and perfect like the spirit. The undisciplined man embroiled, and that's interesting too. So those yogis who have evenly perceived divine bliss in the subconscious, conscious, and superconscious states are pure and perfect like the spirit. And interestingly enough, the 11th, 12th century Cathars in southern France, northern Italy, they were there was like a resurgence of Gnosticism, and they were their spiritual priests or whatever you would want to call them called themselves perfects. So, anyways, continuing, the undisciplined man, embroiled in the relativities of this world, rides the uneven waves of joy or sorrow, or despondency or wrath or apathy in the sea of his consciousness. He beholds only the ever-changing uncertainties of existence when the undulating waves of consciousness are stilled by yoga. The sage beholds in the inner calm of the omnipresent eternal tranquility. The world is full of excitable people who run the gamut of the emotions while participating in the unpredictabilities of daily life. In a lifespan of 60 years, man beholds 21,900 diurnal and nocturnal motion pictures and is tossed on ceaseless waves of feeling. Buffeted and bewildered, he learns very little from the instructive panorama of life. Yep, such men have to reincarnate until they are able to watch the worldly spectacle like calm, blissful gods. The yogi views this world as entertainment. If he experiences his own life as quote-unquote tragedy, such as illness, poverty, persecution, or bereavement, he is able to say sincerely, quote, "Ah, this dramatic spectacle is only a passing scene. It is not the ultimate reality," unquote. Even as an ordinary man viewing a motion picture of horror or tragedy may say, quote, "What an interesting drama," unquote. If this cosmic show, morning, noon, and night, had only angels and smiles and no pain and tears, it would get boresome and monotonous. Without suffering, mortals would not make the effort to know that they are immortals who cannot suffer. Good point. The spiritual aspirant is thus advised to conquer his emotional reactions to the inevitable dualities of the phenomenal universe, and to remain like his creator in an even ecstatic state. How easily body-identified man is moved by the dualities. But at death, his beloved body cannot be emotionally stirred. The yogi accepts the hint given by death, and so while occupying the body, he treats it kindly but impersonally, like a total stranger. Verse 20. Quote, "The knower of spirit, abiding in the Supreme Being, with unanswering discrimination, free from delusion, is thus neither jubilant at pleasant experiences, nor downcast by unpleasant experiences." And the commentary goes on, "The ordinary man never analyzes the lessons inherent in the cinema of daily life. He remains identified with those pictures, grieving or rejoicing as the case may be." Indeed. The yogi who roasts in a fire of wisdom, all seeds of new desires become free from the thraldom of reincarnation. Nevertheless, not having finished the effects of all past actions, he encounters in his present life good and evil happenings, health or disease, flowing from his past karma. Possessing inner tranquility and the joyous spirit, he is not excited at the advent of good fortune. Neither is he depressed by calamities. He watches with a calm, indifferent attitude the joyous and sorrowful scenes of his life, and what have they to do with him? And this next section is transcending the sensory world, attaining the bliss indestructible. Verse 21. Unattracted to the sensory world, the yogi experiences the ever-new joy inherent in the self. Engaged in divine union of the soul with spirit, he attains bliss indestructible. Well, it's not much commentary to this. The yogis learn to control his chitta, primordial feeling, overcome all likes and dislikes relative to external objects, detaching his attention from the outer world into his true inner self. He perceives the ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new joy of the soul. When the self is fully established in union with spirit, his ever-new joy becomes immutable. Verse 22. O son of Kunti, Arjuna, because sense pleasures spring from outward contacts and have beginning and end, they are ephemeral. They are begetters only of misery. No sage seeks happiness from them. And so the commentary elucidates the truth in these words from the Gita has been echoed down the centuries by many lacerated hearts. Quote, O Lord, give the support of thy hand to me, the blind man, who has been looted of his wealth of wisdom by the violent bandits called senses, and who has been flung by them into the deep desolate well of delusion. Unquote. Pleasures obtained through the senses are limited and transitory. Overtaxed, the senses give unhappiness. Eating to excess or listening to music continually produces discomfort instead of joy. A saint, therefore, speaks of all pleasures that arise from sense contacts as generators of grief. They often create unhappiness in the beginning and in the end. Even the desire for sense enjoyments and the process of indulging in them involves some form of suffering, if not in conscience or body, then in the thought that they must end. The person, for instance, who wishes to accumulate money by hook or crook goes through unending worries. Perhaps when he is successful and is receiving a little material happiness, other people try to relieve him of his wealth, which fills him with forebodings. Old and diseased, he finds his money cannot buy him youth or health. Death delivers the final painful disillusionment to the poor fellow. Quote, he can't take it with him. Unquote. Indeed. Knowing that the transitory pleasures of the material world always end in sorrow, saints do not concentrate on deriving happiness from the impure sources of the senses. When a man's mind gets used to exciting pictures, it loses the ability to appreciate the serener forms of joy. Similarly, finding ephemeral pleasures from the tumultuous senses of life and from a constant search for recreation, one loses the power to concentrate within and to find the happiness of meditation. As a little boy accustomed to mischievous activity sees no joy in quietude, so an adult who adapts himself to a restless way of living finds no attraction in deep contemplation. When the mind, like a gourmand, insatiably pursues coarse sense pleasures, it is unable to form a taste for the finer fare of the soul. Yogis who know the superior quality of divine joy as compared with the sense joy. The ordinary man is tempted by the lesser charm of the senses because he has not tasted the higher joy of the soul. Only by weighing material pleasures against meditational bliss can man be inspired to escape sense domination. That's a very good point. It is a wise man who can say, quote, O supreme blessedness, I have weighed thee and sense lures in the balance of my experience and have found thee weightier, far more tempting than any other temptation. Unquote. Man belies. Sorry, I need to take a quick drink. Man belies his unique status in creation when he remains satisfied with sense pleasures. Quote, the human body, though transient, is capable of serving the supreme object of life. Unquote. The Srimad Bhagavata points out, quote, it is only at the end of a long chain of evolution in lower forms that the ego passes into incarnation within a human body. Before that physical form falls a prey to death, the wise man should endeavor to obtain through it the highest good. Animals and even lower forms of life can pursue the objects of the senses. Human existence should not be wasted on them. Unquote. Many human beings refuse to undergo the restraint of giving up sense pleasure for an unknown soul pleasure. Their reasoning is a travesty of human judgment. Oh, if only they knew. The sense indulgence forms bad habits and sense indulgence forms bad habits and destroys the desire for superior pleasures. Not quite the sentence. Most people follow their misery-making sense longings because they cannot picture the nature of divine bliss. Their bad habits blind them completely and destroy the power of envisioning any better joys. If young people, before getting entangled in worldly life, experience the bliss of meditation, they are little likely to fall victims of the ubiquitous sense delusions. Verse 23. He is truly a yogi who, on this earth and up to the very time of death, is able to master every impulse of desire and wrath. He is a happy man. And the commentary elucidates, even an advanced yogi may occasionally feel in his active life the impulses of lust and anger owing to karmic impulses of the past. If he steadfastly perseveres in his yogic path, resisting up to the end of life the occasional surprise visits, quote unquote, of undesirable emotions, he will attain the final union with spirit. The Gita instructs the devotee to die fighting his evil impulses rather than to succumb to them and again to be enmeshed in the miseries of incarnation. The yogi is advised not only to remain concentrated on the divine bliss during meditation, but to feel it during activity in order successfully to combat the promptings of past harmful impulses buried in the subconscious mind. A person who fails to carry over the bliss of meditation into the activities of his daily life is liable to be overwhelmed by sudden remembrances of past evil worldly experiences. The yogi who always feels the inner joy of the soul is able to subdue any erratic emotional urges. The desire to indulge in sensory temptations is called the kama. Again, the Kama Sutra, right, guys? Yep. That's what it's about. When this desire is obstructed, it gives rise to anger, krodha. These two impulses attack the devotee within and without, giving him thoughts of ephemeral external pleasures on the one hand, and on the other hand, trying to make him forget the superior pleasures of the spirit. During meditation and the practice of Kriya Yoga, when the devotee goes beyond the state of physical perceptions, he may feel a secret invasions of desires and wrath arising from past karmic involvements. Absolutely. I will reiterate that for sure. Continuing, but if he continues his concentration at the point between his eyebrows on the state of divine bliss and does not fulfill the evil impulses by outward expression, he will find victory and happiness both in meditation and in worldly activity. Absolutely, yet again. Amen. 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 Verse 24. Only that yogi who possesses the inner bliss, who rests on the inner foundation, who is one with the inner light, becomes one with spirit. After attaining freedom from karma connected with the physical, astral, and ideational bodies, he attains complete liberation in spirit, even while living in the body. And end of the verse, and the commentary continues. To become free forever, the devotee must destroy all karma connections with each of his three bodies. Ordinarily, this is accomplished during the slow evolutionary process of countless incarnations, alternations of births and deaths, first between the physical and astral worlds, and then between the astral and causal realms. However, one who has attained significant spiritual progress in previous lives and who is adept at Kriya Yoga can hasten his evolution by the inner method and attain liberation while still incarnate in the physical form, as cited in this Gita verse. It is not enough to persist in fighting the sense impulses and thus strengthen the mind. To become one with spirit, the yogi must enter the deeper states of blissful samadhi and keep his consciousness ever identified with the soul. Not only must he withdraw his attention from the sensory world, but by becoming immersed in the inner astral and wisdom, i.e. causal, light emanating from the soul, he must betake himself through the interpenetrating physical, astral, and ideational bodies into the infinite ocean of spirit. So as long as man has any material bodies, chapter 2, verse 20, man's three bodies. That's what they're referencing to. So we already did that in the previous video. So as long as a man has any material desires, he has to work out his karma in a physical body. When he is able to extricate himself by non-attachment in the practice of Kriya Yoga from all fleshly delusions and bondage, he then finds himself confined in the astral body and entangled in his astral karma. By deeper immersions in ecstasy, the devotee escapes from the astral body and becomes lodged in the causal or ideational body, vibrating with the original subtle seeds of all past karmic impulses. When God thought out the complicated labyrinth of man's life, he really put his mind to it. Jesus said that after the destruction of his body, he would rebuild it in 3 days. By this statement, he was implying that he would rise above all past impulses connected with the experiences of the physical, astral, and causal bodies in the 3 periods, i.e. days, of ecstatic upliftment or emergence. A yogi experiences attachment to different effects of past actions as he consciously ascends through his 3 bodies, conquering all karmic, physical, astral, and ideational. He is indeed free in spirit. Verse 25. With sins obliterated, doubts removed, senses subjugated, the rishis, sages or seers, contributed to the welfare of mankind, attain emancipation in spirit. Rishi, literally seers, are liberated sages who, by divine permission, are reborn on earth, free from all
karmic sins and the delusive confusion of mortal doubts to serve as ideal human models for the inspiration of mankind. In common parlance, however, the word rishi has been applied to the reference to three types of advanced souls. One, the true rishi, as noted in the preceding paragraph, deva rishis. Two, the sage who is a knower of God but who may not yet be fully liberated, the Brahma rishis. And three, the saint or the ascetic or divine temperament and spiritual accomplishment who is earnestly engaged in those spiritual practices through which he is rapidly acquiring rishi-like qualities and advancing towards liberation. Raja rishis, royal rishis. This Gita verse therefore speaks of the qualities that are eminently manifested in true rishis as being the qualities through which advanced souls will attain their liberation in spirit. A yogi is one who practices a technique of God realization, or for God realization. A Swami is one who has taken a formal vow of celibacy and a personal non-possession. He is a member of the monastic order of Swamis established in its present form by Adi Shankara over 1,000 years ago. Through divine ardor and the emergence of their lives in God, yogi renunciants and yogi renunciants advance towards liberation. But a true rishi, a liberated soul who reincarnates with a God-ordained mission, is the rarest and highest type of human being, having come to earth to bring illumination to all. He is a man of God realization as well as an active man of works. The external circumstances of his life have, for him, no meaning. Some rishis such as the Lahiri Mayasaya, were married men who assumed that difficult status in order to encourage worldly people to seek divine path regardless of their outward entanglements. He who hungers for God will not allow any obstacle to stand in his way. Conversely, those who are not in earnest about the spiritual life will permit the slightest difficulty to deter them. And that is an absolute fact. Verse 26, renunciants who are desireless and wrathless, mind-controlled, and self-realized are completely free both in this world and in the beyond. The spiritually ardent who have found their soul and its connection with the Spirit achieve complete emancipation in this life, carrying with them the same realization into eternity. The word jivan mukta, literally, quote, freed while living, unquote, is a strict sense applied to a yogi who, by refraining from new desires, has destroyed the very root cause of reincarnation. A jivan mukta, however, may still possess subtle hidden seeds of past actions that have not been totally roasted by the fires of wisdom. Some jivan muktas destroy these remnants of past material karma after death by certain work in the astral cosmos. Completing their lessons in the astral spheres, they remove any cause for having to return to this world. Other jivan muktas are able, while still on earth, to materialize past karmic actions in visions and thus exhaust their reincarnation-making power. A concrete illustration of destroying past karmic tendencies by materialization may be given here. A yogi might free himself from greed in eating, yet still retain the samskaras, the impressions of past desires, for indulging in favorite foods. Or he might have completely detached himself from worldly possessions, yet harbor seeds of a past unfulfilled longing for some particular material object or experience. He is thus not fully free. Under tempting circumstances, those hidden seed tendencies might again sprout into activity by entering the superconscious state of conscious visions or by interjecting superconscious dreams into the passive subconscious state of sleep. The yogi can materialize the substance of his past desires with inner aloofness and complete detachment. He then renders powerless those desire seeds by roasting them in the fires of awakened wisdom. One who on earth has destroyed all desires and all karma, past as well as present, is truly, quote, freed while living, unquote. That jivan mukta is then known as a siddha, quote, a perfected being, unquote. Again, very similar to the Gnostic ideas there. Such souls are the quote-unquote renunciants referred to in this verse, those who have abandoned forever all inner and outer causes of bondage. Verses 27 through 28. A Muni who holds liberation as the sole object of life and therefore frees himself from longings, fears, and wrath, controls his senses, mind, and intelligence and removes their external contacts by a technique of making even or neutralizing the currents of prana and apana that manifest as inhalation and exhalation in the nostrils. He fixes his gaze at the middle of the two eyebrows, thus converting the dual currents of the physical vision into a single current of the omniscient astral eye. Such a Muni wins complete emancipation. In these two stanzas, and in chapter 4, verse 29, the Gita leaves behind all abstractions and generalization and mentions the specific technique of salvation, Kriya Yoga. Listen carefully. A Muni, literally, quote, united with the One, unquote, as a yogi who can withdraw his consciousness at will from external sense objects and from mental attraction toward them. The epithet Muni is here applied to an accomplished yogi who, by the technique of Kriya Yoga, has succeeded in dissolving his mind in the infinite bliss. A Muni's only goal is to ascend to the cosmic spirit from which the soul has descended. By discrimination, the Muni watches the soul, identified with the human ego by sense slavery, undergoing innumerable physical and mental miseries. His goal is to convert the ego into the pure soul by scientifically disengaging the mind and intellect from the senses. This is subtitled How Kriya Yoga Imparts Soul Realization. By the special technique of Kriya Yoga, the ingoing breath of prana and the outgoing breath of apana are converted into cool and warm currents. In the beginning of the practice of Kriya Yoga, the devotee feels the cool prana current going up the spine and the warm prana current going down the spine. In accompaniment with the ingoing and outgoing breath, the advanced Kriya Yogi finds that the inhaling breath of prana and the exhaling breath of apana have been, quote-unquote, evened, neutralized, or extinguished. He feels only the cool current of prana going up through the spine and the warm current of apana going down through the spine. These subtle, specialized currents of prana and apana are born of the ubiquitous prana or intelligent life forces that creates the sustains the body. See chapter 4, verses 29 through 30. The prana or crystallizing current is connected with the ingoing breath. It is the specific medium by which the oxygen in the ingoing breath is converted into life force. The apana or eliminating current, which removes the impurities of the body, manifests as the outgoing breath that rids the body of poisonous carbon dioxide gas. Man's body of gross matter consists of tissues constructed of molecules. Molecules are made of atoms. Atoms are formed by electrons and protons. Electrons and protons consist of an intelligent life force, prana, or lifetrons, quote-unquote. Lifetrons can be further resolved into their source, the thoughttrons of God, quote-unquote, thoughttrons. In the beginning, the word was, quote, in the beginning was the word, cosmic vibration, the creative life energy of vibratory thoughts of God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made by him, the Word, and without him was not anything made that was made, unquote. The famous lines in Genesis. And God said, let there be light, and there was light, unquote. And that is, God's thought vibrated into the light of cosmic life or cosmic prana, and cosmic prana was further materialized into electrons, protons, atoms, molecules, cells, and matter. Even as in a motion picture, the illusions of solid earth, or water, or sunlight, or electricity, or gas, or atomic explosions, or manifestations of life and thought in men are all vibrations of light and shadows. So this earth, with its solids, liquids, gases, energies, life, and thoughts in human beings are all vibrations and relativities of God's thoughts and his cosmic light and the shadows of his delusive Maya. The cosmic thought of God thus first materialized as cosmic prana or life force of light, and finally as all matter of the macrocosm. The body of man is a microcosm of the Lord's creation. The microcosmic human body is a composite of the individual soul and life force. Consciousness, life, and flesh, cosmic consciousness, cosmic life, and cosmic matter are nothing but three different vibrations of God thought. When the Kriya Yogi learns to dissolve the ingoing and outgoing breath into a perception of the cool and warm currents going up and down the spine, he then feels his body as sustained by these inner currents of life force and not by their byproduct of breath. He also realizes that the currents are sustained by the Word, the divine vibratory cosmic light of prana that enters the body through the medulla. This life force becomes concentrated in and operative through the cerebral, medullary, and cervical, dorsal, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal centers that energize the body to its minutest cells, i.e. all your chakras. This part's subtitled Kriya Process of Converting Breath into Life Force, Realizing Body as Light. Jesus testified that man shall not live by bread alone, but by the very word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. This memorable passage signifies that man's body does not depend only on external sources of life force, distillations from breath, oxygen, sunshine, solids, and liquids, but also on a direct inner source of cosmic life that enters the body through the medulla, following, i.e., the back of your head where your spine connects to your brain, flowing then to the subtle centers in the brain and the spine. In man, the medulla is spoken of as, quote, the mouth of God, unquote, because it is the chief opening for the divine influx of cosmic vibratory life force, the, quote, unquote, word that then flows, quote, out of the mouth of God, unquote, the medulla, to the reservoir of life energy in the brain and the distributing centers in the spine. In successful meditation, the Kriya Yogi converts the two distinct impulses of inhalation and exhalation into two life currents, the cool prana and the warm apana, felt in the spine. And yes, absolutely, you can feel this. Continuing, he then realizes the truth of Jesus is saying that man is not required to depend on external breath or on bread, quote unquote, or any other outward sustenance as a condition of bodily existence. The yogi perceives the cool and warm currents in the spine to be constantly and magnetically pulling an extra voltage of current from the omnipresent cosmic life force ever flowing through the medulla. He gradually finds that these two spinal currents become converted into one life force, magnetically drawing reinforcements of prana from all the bodily cells and nerves. This strengthened life current flows upward to the point between the eyebrows and is seen as the tricolored spherical astral eye, a luminous sun in the center in which is a blue sphere encircling a bright scintillating star. Jesus referred to this quote unquote single eye in the center of the forehead, and to the truth that the body is essentially formed of light in the following words, quote, if therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light, unquote. When the yogi is able to penetrate his mind into the spiritual eye, he perceives his body as made not of flesh, but of minute light cells of protons and electrons and lifetrons. The physical body is formed from two layers of current, atomic currents appearing as flesh, and a more subtle layer of electrons and protons. The electro-protonic body in turn emanates from the pranic light currents of the superfine astral body. The whole astral body of man consists of various densities of light, even as the physical body is built up from of the different tissues of the skin, flesh, bones, and internal organs. Through his spherical eye, the Kriya Yogi sees his astral body as made of lifetrons, the pranic astral cells. He perceives that the cosmic sunlight of life reflects its rays through the astral spiritual eye into the astral brain and astral plexuses and astral nerve tubes, the nadis, which there are 72,000 of, to sustain the astral body cells. He sees also that his physical body is nothing but a coarser light of electrons, protons, and atoms emanating from his finer astral body. By further advancement, the yogi perceives both his physical and astral bodies to be emanating from his causal or ideational body, which is composed of the coordinating thoughtsons of God. And then it says, see yoga physiology of the astral and causal bodies. The next part is subtitled Experiencing the Body, Life Force, and Mind as Vibrations of the Word of God. This knowledge is necessary to understand that the body and life force and mind, which form the encasement of the soul, are in reality nothing more than differently vibrating thoughts of God. By the practice of Kriya, the yogi scientifically detaches his mind from gross sensory perceptions and realizes that consciousness and life force, prana, or cosmic light, are the basis of all matter. The Kriya Yogi adopts a scientific method to divert his mind and reason from the perceptions of physical flesh. He perceives the body as light and consciousness by rising above the gross perception of breath. All inner experiences, like that of subconscious sleep, can only take place when the consciousness of breath disappears. The Kriya Yogi has no need to desire to withhold breath forcibly in the lungs. He becomes mentally so calm that he feels himself to be aloof from breath. And let me break off and say this is absolutely true. And in meditation, you do want to get to this point where it's hard. It takes a lot of time and practice, But there will be a point in time where in the middle of your meditation, you'll realize that you're not breathing, and like you're not holding it in. You're not really breathing in. You're not breathing out. You're kind of doing both, and you're just not conscious of it whatsoever, as if you were asleep. And the funny thing is that when you make that realization, it breaks the whole thing, and you got to start over. But by hitting that and realizing that, like, oh my God, like I'm not breathing, that kind of thing, like it's one of those things where you're just like, it's a sign, right? It's telling you like, okay, you're doing good. Here you go. Just wanted to give you guys that a little something there. Anyways, continuing, by the practice of Kriya Yoga, he can consciously and at will attain the breathless state and sustain his life in his body solely by the cool and warm currents flowing through the spine and trickling down from the spiritual eye. Trickling down. If a wet battery, which is sustained by electricity and dependent on a replenishment of its water supply, could somehow be converted into a dry battery, it could do away with the dependence on water and be sustained by its own reservoir of energy recharged solely by electricity. Kriya Yoga similarly helps the body battery, which depends on cosmic life force flowing through the medulla and on oxygen, sunshine, liquids, and solids, to become converted so that it can sustain itself solely on the life force flowing into the body from the cosmic sources and stored in the regenerative reservoir of life energy in the brain and spinal centers. The use of Kriya Yoga conclusively proves the truth in the Bible that man's body battery can live by the word of vibratory current coming from God. The life in the body is directly sustained by the cosmic prana flowing through the medulla. Through the operation of Maya or delusion, however, man believes that he cannot live without food and other outward aids. He becomes erroneously dependent on the gross sources of energy, reinforcement through oxygen, sunshine, solids, liquid. Man has formed a bad mortal habit in the feeling that he cannot exist without a supply of energy from these material substances. That is why, if oxygen, sunshine, solids, and liquids are denied to the body, man's frightened consciousness permits the life force to depart. Next section is subtitled Neutralizing the Currents of Prana and Apana, the Breathless State of Ecstasy. Oh, and it is a breathless state of ecstasy, let me tell you. Quote, when the devotee is convinced by Kriya Yoga that he can live solely by the inner source of cosmic energy, he realizes that the body is a wave of the all-sufficing cosmic ocean of life. By the special technique of Kriya Yoga, the devotee, through perfect calmness, through the greater supply of energy distilled from oxygen in the Kriya breath, and through an enhanced flow of cosmic energy coming into the body through the medulla, is less and less subject to the necessity for breathing. By deeper Kriya Yoga, the bodily life, ordinarily dependent on reinforcement by life force distilled from gross outer sources, begins to be sustained by the cosmic life only. Then breathing, inhalation and exhalation, ceases. All the trillions of body cells become like regenerating dry batteries, needing nothing but the inner quote-unquote electricity recharged from the cosmic source of life. In this way, the bodily cells remain in a suspended state, that is, they neither grow nor decay. They are sustained and vitalized directly from life energy dynamos in the brain and spine. When the cells cease to grow, they are not required to depend on life current distilled from oxygen. When decay ceases in the body, the cells no longer excrete impurities into the blood, necessitating an exhalation of the breath to expel carbon dioxide. Being no longer required pump carbon dioxide-laden and oxygen-filled blood to and from the lungs, the heart becomes totally calmed. The breath and breathing are acquired mortal habits of the life force. Kriya Yoga retrains the life force to remember that it lives only by the cosmic source. Pranayama, or Kriya Yoga, signifies one thing: controlling the life force in the body by conscious will so that it does not depend on oxygen, sunshine, solids, and liquids, but on the inner source of cosmic life. Kriya Yoga Pranayama withdraws life force from the activities of the heart and the body cells by rendering those activities unnecessary, and unites that bodily prana with the cosmic life force. Man's slavish dependence on breath is thus realized to be delusory. When the yogi expert in pranayama can thus disengage at will with the life force from its bondage to oxygen and so on, he can immortalize it by uniting it with the cosmic life. Pardon me while I take a drink. This stanza of the Gita highlights the necessity of neutralizing or, quote, making even, unquote, the currents of prana and apana.
This effect is made possible by the practice of Kriya Yoga, which recharges the body cells by the inner cosmic life so that inhalation and exhalation become even, that is, still and unnecessary. The life and mind and intellect are active in the body and its senses when the life current flows outwardly through the afferent and efferent nerves as a result of the downflowing apana current. This outflowing current is quote-unquote uneven, restless and erratic from the bombardment of impulses to and from the nerve centers, stimuli that constantly vary during the states of wakefulness and sleep. But when the life current is withdrawn into the spine and brain, this interiorization frees the life force from the excitants of senses and their objects. The prana and apana currents flowing in the spine become calm and even, generating a tremendous magnetic power and joy. And yes, it does. Subtitle for this section is Uniting One's Life and Consciousness with Cosmic Light and Consciousness. Let's see here, I'm at 668. Oh, okay. Alright, we're close. After I'm done with this, I'm going to be done. 668. Okay. Oh, uniting one's life and consciousness with cosmic light and consciousness. As the meditation deepens, the apana current and the upward flowing prana current becomes neutralized into one ascending current, seeking its source in the cerebrum. Breath is still, life is still, sensations and thoughts are dissolved, the divine light of life and consciousness perceived by the devotee in the cerebral spinal centers becomes one with the cosmic light and cosmic consciousness. Acquisition of the power of this realization enables the yogi to consciously detach his soul from identification with the body. He becomes free from the distressing bondage of desires, the body's attachments and longing for sensory gratification, fears, the thought of possible non-fulfillment of desires, and anger, the emotional response to obstacles that thwart fulfillments of said desires. These are three impelling forces in man are the greatest enemies of soul bliss. They must be destroyed by that devotee who aspires to reach God. Life force is the connecting and disconnecting link between matter and spirit, between body consciousness and soul consciousness. The ordinary man does not know how to get at the bodily prana directly. Therefore, this life force works automatically to enliven the body and senses, and by the medium of breath ties man's attention solely to his physical existence. But by the use of Kriya Yoga, the devotee learns how to distill life force out of breath and how to control prana. With this control, the life force can be switched off at will from the five sense channels and turned inward, thus diverting the soul's attention from the perception of material phenomena to the perception of spirit. By this scientific step-by-step method, the yogi ascends from the senses in actuality and not by a mere ineffectual mental diversion from them. He completely disconnects mind and reason and attention from the body by switching off the life force from the five senses. He learns scientifically to divert the spine and brain, the currents from his five sense channels, and thus to unite his consciousness with the joy of higher spiritual perceptions in the seven centers, chakras. When he is able to remain immersed in divine bliss, even in his active state, he does not become further involved in desires to enjoy external objects. Radiating the calmness of divine realizations, he is not disturbed by the springing up of fear and anger from non-fulfillments of material desires. He finds his soul no longer tied to matter, but forever united to the cosmic bliss of spirit. Such a Kriya yogi, who scientifically withdraws his mind and intellect from the senses and with unwinking gaze beholds the spirit through the astral eye, is a true Muni. The ordinary man watches the motion pictures of matter in a limited portion of space, but the Muni, or accomplished yogi, can behold through his all-seeing spherical astral eye the entire light of creation that sustains all the cosmic motion pictures of the physical, astral, and causal universes. This next subsection is called Universal Path of Liberation, Ascent Through the Spine. Methods of spiritual freedom are various, but the actual attainment of liberation by ascent through the spine is universal. Whether through the intense devotion and prayer of the bhakta, or the pure discrimination of the jnani, or the non-attached selfless actions of the karma yogi, the consciousness purified and centered thereby still makes its final ascent to God through the subtle spinal channels through which it descended into flesh. Oh boy. This really has a lot to do with what I'm bringing you guys soon, so I'm kind of glad I read this part here. Anyways, continuing, the principles of Kriya Yogi, therefore, are not the formula of a sectarian rite, but a science through the application of which the individual may realize his soul descended into the body and became identified with the senses, and how that soul may be withdrawn from the senses and reunited with spirit by a scientific method of meditation. This route of descent and ascension is the one universal path that every soul must travel. And I will say one thing, if you guys are interested in checking out something early on, go and read The Descent of Inanna, one of the most ancient mythologies that this world ever has. Read The Descent of Inanna and come back and listen to this last part. If you don't do it, I'm going to be bringing it and reading it soon, so either way. Kriya Yoga teaches first to withdraw the mind from sensory objects by self-control, and then scientifically to disconnect the mind and intelligence, manas, mind, and intelligence, buddhi, from the senses by switching off the life force from the 5 sense channels, and then to take the ego, mind, and intellect through the 5 astral centers of the spine, through the 6th center, the medulla, which is magnetically connected with the spiritual eye in the middle of the forehead. Yes, it is. And finally, to the 7th centers of the omniscience in the middle of the cerebrium, really the very top of the outside top of your head. The Kriya Yogi there attains perception of his self as soul and finds his ego, intellect, and mind to be dissolved in soul ecstasy. He then learns how to take his soul from the prisons of the physical, astral, and causal bodies and to reunite the soul with spirit. As the physical eyes, through the frontal vision, reveal a portion of matter, so the omnipresent spiritual eye, through its boundless spherical vision, reveals the entire astral and ideational cosmoses. In the beginning, when the yogi is able to penetrate his mind through the astral eye, he first sees his astral body. By further advancement, he sees the entire astral cosmos, for which his body is but a part. Without entering the spiritual astral eye, no one can know how to take his life force and consciousness through the astral plexuses and the spine. After entering the spiritual eye, he passes in a step-by-step way through the perception of the physical body, the perception of the astral eye, the perception of the astral body, the perception of the astral cerebral spinal tunnel with the 7 astral plexuses or trap doors, or seals, or churches for that matter, and through the causal body into final freedom. It requires intricate scientific explanation to interpret Kriya Yoga, but the art itself is very simple. Kriya Yoga, practiced deeply, will dissolve breath into mind and mind into intuition, intuition into the joyous perception of the soul, and the soul into the cosmic bliss of spirit. That is absolutely true. The yogi then understands how his soul descended into matter and how his prodigal soul has been led from matter back to the mansion of omnipresence, there to enjoy the, quote, fatted calf, unquote, of wisdom. A man who has attained the spirit by universal way of Kriya Yoga, is spoken of as an accomplished Kriya Yogi, or a Muni. After attaining this high Muni state, the yogi can work in the world as a Rishi. A Muni is he who has ecstatically dissolved himself in God by the science of yoga, and a Rishi is he who, after finding liberation as a Muni, goes on to live in the world as an example to others of the effectiveness of yoga as the supreme science of liberation. The science of Kriya Yoga has been preserved for mankind in the highest Hindu Bible, the Bhagavad Gita. It is this Kriya Yoga that God gave to Manu, the original Adam, and through him to Janaka and other royal sages. The science became lost in the materialistic ages. Kriya Yoga was revived again in the 19th century by Mahavatar Babaji, a guru of Lahiri Mayasaya. The ancient science of salvation is now spreading to all corners of the globe. See Chapter 4, verses 1 to 2.
and for this next part. In contradistinction to other teachings, Kriya Yoga is not only points out a universal highway of ascending the soul to the spirit, but gives mankind a daily usable technique through whose practice the devotee, with the help of a guru, may re-enter the kingdom of God. One theoretical teaching teaches only to another, but any true practitioner of Kriya Yoga finds it to be the shortest way and quickest conveyance to the kingdom of spirit. Verse 29, which I think is the last verse. He finds peace who knows me as the enjoyer of the holy rites and of the austerities, as the infinite Lord of creation, and as the good friend of all creatures. So I'll read that again with the parentheses. He finds peace who knows me as Krishna, or Christ, as the enjoyer of the holy rites, yajanas, and of the austerities, which is offered by devotees, as the infinite Lord of creation, and as the good friend of all creatures. He attains blessedness who realizes the Lord to be the creator of all dream creatures, the receiver and perceiver of all offerings and sacrifices, and the sustaining, unconditionally loving, always ready to redeem, everlasting friend of man. Who can bring enough flowers of a devotion to the altar of God, who speaks thus of his friendship for man? And what is devotion? Quote, as its own seeds reach back to the ankola tree, as a needle is drawn to a magnet, as a chaste wife remains with her spouse, as a creeper clings to a tree, and as the river merges in the ocean. If thought thus reaches the lotus leaf of the Lord and remains there for all time, that is said to be devotion, unquote. And this whole part here, he attains blessedness who realizes the Lord to be the creator of all dream creatures, the receiver and perceiver of all offerings and sacrifices. And fascinatingly enough, some of the stuff I've got bringing you guys to, this whole idea of like Jesus, for instance, being the sacrifice and the sacrificer all at once is something that is going to come up in the future. But there's this is the end of the chapter. So, Om Tat Sat, in the Upanishad of the Holy Bhagavad Gita, the discourse of Lord Krishna to Arjuna, which is the scripture of yoga and the science of God realization. This is the 5th chapter, called Union through Renunciation of the Fruits of Action. A very important chapter. Very, very important chapter, because renouncing the fruits of actions is something that I think is something that is needed. If you guys, if people really want to, I'm trying to find this thing here. Oh, window capture. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. So here we are at his website, at the Self-Realization Fellowship. Here you can find his books. You can find meditation techniques. You can find teachings. There's all kinds of different stuff here. You've been listening about Kriya Yoga this whole time. So if you guys are interested and you want to sign up and check it out, it's probably not going to hurt. I learned a different way. So, however, I find this all to be exactly all the stuff that I ended up learning myself. I'm kind of coming into the fact that, hey, look, like these things are just being, validated, I guess you could say. And that's the thing about any spiritual path. It's, I always say this to people, it's, well, how is it working out for you? Is it made your life that much better? Have you gained intuition or really anything other than what life normally brings you? And a lot of people, they'll stop and think about that for a minute, and I think people should. So at their bookstore, you can purchase this book on paperback, $29.50. Not bad. It comes with a really nice slipcase. I just bought the paperback version just recently. In my last audio, I mentioned that I had already gotten up to 350 pages of it. So I stopped reading it so I can go back to read the rest of this to you guys. Here is their YouTube channel, Self-Realization Fellowship. I've listened to quite a few of the sermons and things like that, and they're great. Some of these people, I'm not necessarily into the let's say the church worship part of things anymore. I've left that alone a long time ago. But so many great sermons and things like that these guys, ladies and men, I should say, partake. So if you want something positive, that's something that you can definitely check out. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to put on the end screen here. There it is. And just thank all of you for showing up and listening and being a part of the chat and everything. I very much appreciate that. And I hope that you guys get something out of this, as much as I did when I first read it, or I should say listened to it. I've listened to it like 5-6 times now. It takes 40 hours plus to listen to this book through like an audio player, PDF audio player on my phone. So it's just one of those things where I gained so many great insights after reading this, and I hope you guys do as well. It's and those of you that do things like do your research and things like that, there's an element to the way that he breaks this down to, especially if you're looking at older writings and ancient writings and scriptural writings. We tend to just look at it as the face value of it, but when you read books like this, it really just opens the whole door up to the fact that there might be something completely different here at play. And like I mentioned before, one of the interesting things about the Gnostic things is like Samael is referring to like the a silent angel, or I'm sorry, the blind angel or blind demon or something like that. Very similar to the blind king. So anyways, I appreciate you guys being here with me, and until next time, which I think is going to be tomorrow. Today was kind of short for sort of a audiobook reading. Usually go at least 3 hours. Tomorrow I should be back for much longer. So thanks again for coming out, and I will see you guys the next time. Peace.